Therapy Chat Podcast, episode 362.
This is the Therapy Chat Podcast with Laura Reagan, LCSWC. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. And now, here's your host, Laura Reagan, LCSWC.
This week's episode is sponsored by Therapy Notes, the #1 rated electronic health record system available today. With live telephone support 7 days a week, it's clear why Therapy Notes is rated 4.9 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot and has a 5-star rating on Google. Therapy Notes makes billing, scheduling, note-taking, and telehealth incredibly easy. And now, for all you prescribers out there, Therapy Notes is proudly introducing ePrescribe. Use coupon code CHAT or click the link in the show notes to get 2 free months at therapynotes.com. Want to trade 5 days in chilly February to learn and play in Cancun? Then register for Innovations in Psychotherapy 2023 by Leading Edge Seminars and use code LAURA to save 10% on any 5-day workshop fee when purchased with a room at leadingedgecancun.com. You'll earn CEs in the morning, then have afternoons for fun at an all-inclusive resort. Workshops by Frank Anderson, Ariel Schwartz, John Briere, and more. Register today for 10% off workshop fees when purchased with a room using code LAURA at leadingedgecancun.com. Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat. I'm your host, Laura Reagan. Today is December 21st when I'm recording this. It's the solstice, and in our Trauma Therapist Network community meeting today, I led a solstice retreat for our self-care call. It was lovely. This is a time of year where the seasons and the natural cycles of nature draw us inward. It's a time to be reflective. And for many of us, so many of us, and you know for me, if you've been listening to Therapy Chat recently, there's a lot of grief right now. I know that so many of the therapists and other healers that I speak with regularly are sharing that they too are feeling a lot of the heaviness, grief, whether it's because of having a strained relationship with family, someone you're missing who you wish you could feel physically or emotionally close to, someone you're longing for connection with. It aches that much more during the holidays. For me, although I just shared that I'm carrying a lot of grief right now, which is true, I also feel happy today because it's the first day that I've felt like myself again after recently having gotten COVID again. This is my second time having it. And I suppose because of having gotten the booster, which made me feel like crap when I got it only about 6 weeks ago, that must be why I'm having a quicker recovery process. And it's quicker than the first time I had COVID when I had the Delta variant. This time it's the Omicron variant. And, we heard that Omicron was milder than Delta, but it wasn't mild for me. I mean, it was mild in that I wasn't hospitalized. Thankfully, I wasn't dangerously sick, but I did not feel well at all. I couldn't think. I couldn't work. I had a lot of congestion. A little bit of headache. Why am I sharing all this? You might be like, who cares? But I think, a lot of people have asked me about my symptoms, and if you haven't had it yet, you might be curious about what it feels like for people who are dealing with it. And if you have had it or you just don't care, you can fast forward this part. Anyway, I'm glad to be feeling more like myself, and it's pretty curious. There were definitely a lot of emotional effects. It definitely made me feel emotionally there were moments where I felt like really super dysregulated and out of the ordinary way, where I know my husband was like confused by my emotional reactions to things. Also, I want to share, for what it's worth, the person that I caught it from, I had a probably less than 5-minute interaction outside, unmasked, without touching. So in this time where many of us are not really sure what is the best way to protect ourselves and what is the safe type of interaction to have. That I would have thought would have been a safe interaction, but it wasn't. So, all right. So enough about that. I also wanted to just tell you a little bit about what this week's episode is about. As I mentioned, what it was going to be about last week. That's what it is. We are continuing our replay episodes with Sharon Martin, coming back with another replay. And this time she's talking about some strategies to get through the holidays when you have a family that is characterized by the types of dynamics that she taught us about on last week's episode: the secrecy, shame, chaos, conflict, communication issues. And she's going to talk about how to, I'll say survive the holidays, but it's really we want to do more than survive. We want to be our best selves, show up for ourselves without abandoning ourselves. And I think that's a lot of what Sharon talks about. So I hope you will enjoy my conversation with Sharon Martin on getting through the holidays when things are not as you wish they were. So just want to add that if you're a therapist and you're considering joining Trauma Therapist Network, maybe you've been busy, you might not have heard, registration is currently open until the end of the year. So up through December 31st, 2022, Trauma Therapist Network registration is currently open. And if you go to go.traumatherapistnetwork.com/join, you can join. You actually will put your information in and you'll be added to the waiting list, but you'll immediately be sent a link to register and a coupon code to save 20% off your first month. I'm closing the doors on January 1st and will reopen registration for Trauma Therapist Network membership in March 2023, if all goes as planned, but prices are going to increase. So if you wanted to get in with the best prices, we now have 3 levels of membership at $37, $67, and $97, and each level gets different access. And we also have group practice membership available, and Canadian members can now join. So lots of exciting changes happening in Trauma Therapist Network. And if you would like to enjoy things like today's solstice self-care retreat and our regular case consultation calls, our community calls, our Q&As, and our trainings and workshops, then now's your chance to get into this membership with 20% off your first month at the lowest prices that we will have. So thank you for listening. Whatever you celebrate, right now we are in Hanukkah, and many people celebrate the solstice. Christmas is in a few days, and Kwanzaa starts on December 26th. And that certainly does not capture all of the holidays that come at this time of year. So whatever you may celebrate, I hope you are feeling loved and giving love to the people who are important in your life. And if you are struggling, please remember that you are not alone. There are people who can help. If you're looking for a trauma therapist, you can find one in Trauma Therapist Network at traumatherapistnetwork.com. It's a growing list. We have over 110 therapists listed right now, and hopefully we will have many more soon. So if there's not anyone in your area now, there are also some other directories for finding therapists who are trained in trauma that are listed in the resources section of the Trauma Therapist Network. So thank you. As we near the end of the year, I want to thank you for listening to Therapy Chat. I'm grateful for you. Take care.
Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat. Today, as promised, I'm bringing you an interview with Sharon Martin, LCSW, one of a few interviews we've done. And this time we are going to be talking about surviving the holidays when you had maybe not so great of a childhood. So Sharon, thank you so much for coming back to Therapy Chat today.
Oh, I love being on Therapy Chat. So it's my pleasure. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. So let's just dive right in because we're a few days away from Christmas, which is a pretty big holiday that affects many people. But I think everything we're going to be talking about is relevant whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, another winter holiday, Festivus, or throughout the year. You know, all of the holidays that come up entail family gatherings and memories of family gatherings. And I think that, you know, the issues that we're talking about are relevant, whether it's winter or summer or anywhere in between.
Yeah, I agree. I think the holidays, they end up feeling so loaded, I think, emotionally, with so many expectations. And like you had said, the memories also of the past holidays, that sometimes we're aware that we're thinking about them, or that there's just sort of some emotional energy that we're carrying with us in terms of our feelings, or even just how our body's feeling, that we just sort of carry that with us, I think, year after year. And it's just sort of like, it just sort of clicks in. I think once, you hit Thanksgiving time and the holidays are coming, you start anticipating. And I think sometimes there's sort of some anticipatory stress or grief or depression maybe that we experience just knowing that this event or events and gatherings are coming, and, kind of wondering how we're going to cope with it.
Very much. And I think that, like you said, sometimes it's really not in our conscious awareness because, people will start saying around November, I don't know, like right at the beginning of November, oh, it's just this time of year. I always feel like kind of down. I don't really know what it is, and it's like, it's hard to put your finger on it. But if you really think about it and you realize that every year around this time, you feel tense or you feel sad or unsettled. So It's like there's like something going on in the back of your mind that you're not really in touch with. And it's keeping you a little preoccupied or distracted from, what you're doing day to day. I think that can be really impactful.
And I think the other thing that sometimes for those of us in North America is that we've also got the winter season that hits right around the holidays, which means, some of us are really pretty strongly affected by the, lack of sunlight and the bad weather, snow or storms or things that keep us cooped up inside. And sometimes that really has an impact on our mood too. And I think also, you just sometimes kind of feel stuck. I think when you feel like you can't get out and enjoy the sunlight and maybe exercising and being in nature as much as you would like to.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know the dark around North America after October is definitely something that people talk about, because I know for me, if I might be leaving work at 5:30 and I'm like, it feels like it's 9 p.m. It's just pitch black.
Yes. Yes. Very true. And yes, and many people say they go to work when it's dark and they leave work and it's dark. And so they really haven't had a chance to get outside, and have some of that natural energy boost and mood boost that sometimes we get from sun and nature, like I had said. So we've kind of got that layered on there too. And again, I think it's just helpful to be aware of how much that might be impacting you as well. Because I think sometimes, for me, I'm just kind of going about life, being busy, and then I will sort of notice that I'm getting snappy with people. I'm getting short-tempered. I'm just kind of crankier than usual. Things are bothering me more than they might at other times. And that's sort of that accumulation of stressors and difficulties that are just sort of piling up. And they don't necessarily have to be huge things, because we tend to notice the huge, disappointments and upsets and things that are going on. But often these small little stressors are just kind of piling up. And then we're sort of caught off guard going, okay, well, why did I have such a big reaction to something? And it's often that both that there's things going on in our current life that we haven't been aware of that were bothering us. And then there's also, often it's kind of pulling us back to something that happened in the past. Sort of that triggering effect where, it's pulling back a memory or something that, challenging that happened in the past that, maybe is sort of unresolved, or it was just, a difficult time. And it's sort of brought back into the present without us fully being aware that we're thinking about that, or that's, sort of playing into the reaction that we have today. And I think, that's often, what I experience myself. And I know that many of my clients will say that is they're like, well, I'm having such a big reaction to things. And it doesn't feel good to me. And it also doesn't feel good to the people that you're around, because they're often confused. Like, why are you so upset about this? Or why are you so irritable? There doesn't seem to be, something going on right in this moment that would warrant that kind of reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that's definitely true when our trauma gets triggered. And a lot of times, the disappointments of how things weren't for you when you were growing up, the expectations of the family closeness and festive feeling that you may have wished for around the holidays, but always felt disappointed because it never seemed to measure up, or somebody would always get drunk or get loud at the family dinner, and it would seem like everything was ruined and everyone would be upset. Those kinds of memories linger with us, even if we don't have, again, conscious awareness that that's there.
Yeah, there can be a real deep pain, and I think also a real deep shame that we experience, because as you were saying, I think there's a lot of expectations, and along with those expectations, there's also a lot of comparison that we experience, right? I mean, you cannot get away from the images of what Christmas is supposed to look like, right? It's everywhere on TV, on magazines, in the movies. It is giving us a very clear picture of this happy family all together, getting along, an abundance of presents. And it just looks, that picturesque, experience. And then that's not what most people experience, right? There can be so many variations of this. In so many ways that it doesn't live up to that expectation, that we end up feeling like, well, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with my family that my Christmas experience isn't, what I'm seeing on TV? So that's that part that feels shameful. That's the what's wrong with me? There must be a problem with me. That's sort of this unworthiness, or this I'm unlovable, those kind of really negative messages and beliefs that we have about ourselves that, again, here as adults, can sort of be unconsciously triggered for us just by looking through a magazine or something like that. That, again, you may just sort of notice that there's sort of these feelings bubbling up that might be sadness, they might be anger, they might be shame, that are all sort of that accumulation of feeling like there's something wrong and that you've missed out on something. And I think there's also, often an element of hopelessness that comes into it too, a sense that I'm never going to have that. That can never be my reality. And again, with the expectation that that should be your reality because everybody else has it, right? And that's part of, where our thinking gets off track, is because we're going through life assuming that, I'm the only one who has a really crappy holiday, whose family is really dysfunctional. Everybody gets into arguments. We never have enough money. Uncle Joe gets drunk every year. Whatever, the scenario is, you're just assuming that everybody else is having the picture perfect Christmas or Thanksgiving. And what about me? There has to be something wrong here. And there's sort of nothing that I can do about, I think, ends up being part of that hopeless feeling, which maybe we can get into, talking a little bit more about that so that people can kind of get away from that, because I think there are things that people can do, but not with the mindset of my goal is to create that picture perfect holiday, because it's not possible. It really isn't a reality. That's why it's on TV and in magazines. It's a sales gimmick, essentially, right? It's trying to sell us an idea of what a holiday should be or what a family should be. And I think for me, like, one of the big takeaways, I hope, is that people will remember that the holiday doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to be enjoyable or for there to be something good for you to take away from it, even if it's, one particular piece of it that's enjoyable or relaxing or an opportunity to connect with somebody. It's definitely not an all or nothing, like it's, this great holiday or it's just terrible, right? Like often there's some middle ground if we can allow ourselves to look for it and to create it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And, we can't change if someone we love has passed away and they're not going to be here. They're not here. And we're really sad about it. We can't change that. But that doesn't mean that we still can't have a way to celebrate and feel a meaningful connection either with that person or with yourself, that it does not make the reality different. Just like if you don't have enough money and you can't have the gifts that you wish you could have for Christmas, which, or any gift-giving holiday, and everyone knows that there are many, many people, millions of people who experience this, doesn't mean that you can't find ways to really connect with what is meaningful about the holiday for you and amplify that, even if it's in a moment,
Right. Yeah. And I think like you were talking about, if you've lost somebody that you love, I think we have to, again, sort of go into these holidays with that realistic expectation that it's going to be different this year. It's sort of never going to be the same as it was, when you would spend your, Christmas with your grandma. Let's just say if grandma has passed away, right? We can't have that anymore. And I think we sort of need to look for, some balance between giving ourselves that opportunity to grieve and to be sad and, remember and maybe cry and, have those feelings, and then perhaps look for some ways to, honor the person and sort of incorporate the person into your holidays in a different way, perhaps. And I think oftentimes this involves maybe creating some new traditions and doing some things different than we have done in past years. And again, this is one area that I often, hear people, feeling really stuck about the holiday traditions. And again, sort of the expectation feels like I need to do things the way we've always done them. Of course, there are a lot of traditions around the holidays that are associated with it for most families. And I think most of us, as our lives change and our families grow in different ways, oftentimes we've sort of outgrown some of we've outgrown some of those traditions. I know that I think about, things that I did with my family when my kids were small. They're not things that are necessarily going to be of interest for my family to do now that my kids are older. It's just sort of like things have transformed. There might be some, holiday traditions that we continue to do and some that need to be adapted or just, put to the side, given up for a while. Maybe we come back to them at another stage in life. But I think we need to, remember that just because we've always done it doesn't mean we have to continue to do it every year. Like we can actually look at those holiday traditions and ask ourselves, is this, really something that I want to do? Is it something that's really working for my family this year? And feel like empowered to say, I think I'm going to pass on that this year. That really just doesn't sound fun anymore. That's not going to fill me with, holiday joy. Instead, that just feels like an obligation and one more thing that I have to do. Like, that's not the purpose of a holiday tradition, right?
Right. It's not supposed to be like a burdensome obligation.
Right. And I think so many of them do turn into that. Whether it's, I have to get gifts for everybody, or I have to bake, all these cookies that I bake every year, or send out, Christmas cards, or, spend, Christmas Day at my parents' house. Those may work or may not. You just have to feel like you can question some of those things and make the choice for yourself. I think that's one thing that's really helpful for people to remember, is that you always have choices. Sometimes we have a hard time seeing the choices, or we don't like the choices that we have, but we do have choices. And I always say this, I think, is one of the, the great things about being an adult is you have more choices. You really have a lot of different options. And it's rare that you really are forced into doing something against your will. Usually you're choosing to, and then sometimes, if you're choosing to do something that you don't really want to do, you end up just feeling resentful about it. And that often comes out in some other way that's not so pretty or enjoyable for people. So I think oftentimes, we're afraid of the saying no, or the, telling people that you want to do something different this year. But often when you can be direct and be kind about it, it's better than, like I said, sort of going and doing it and then being in a bad mood or, getting resentful about it.
Yeah, or feeling disempowered because you felt you had to do something. Someone was making you do it when you really had the power to voice that you didn't want to, barring an abusive situation that you were in. But other than that, you do have free choice to what you want to do, even if someone else might be disappointed. It's okay to choose to do what you want or to meet your own needs, and put that as a higher priority than even the possibility that the other person may feel disappointed.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. As actually, I had written myself a little note to talk about that, because that's often one of those big challenges that we come up against, is that we don't want to disappoint people. We don't want to anger or upset people. And again, I think this can be extra strong at the holidays, again, with that idea that we should all get along. It should be loving and close. And, I don't want to, be upsetting, my family. And I'm afraid of that sometimes too, what the reaction is going to be, or it's going to cause a big blowout, right before the holiday. That can be a really, unpleasant, anxiety-provoking feeling. But it is impossible to be pleasing everybody all of the time. So again, if we can sort of just start with the basic understanding that it is inevitable that you are going to upset or displease or offend somebody at some point, probably, within the next week of the holidays. Like that's just being human. And sometimes we do it without realizing it, without the intention of doing it. And other times it is the natural result of us being more assertive and starting to ask for what we need or what we want, especially if you have a family that's not used to that. And, if you as a person are not used to being more assertive, and if you've kind of just gone with the flow and, let other people make the decisions, so that if that's a new dynamic, a new behavior for you, it is going to be uncomfortable. But I assure you that it becomes more comfortable the more that you practice it. And it also becomes easier for your family, the person on the other end, to receive that as well, because they start to get used to the new dynamic as well. And they start to recognize that you're going to ask for what you need and you're going to do things a little bit differently than the way that we have done things, for years in the past. So it's challenging. I do think there's, in some ways, no avoiding it, except that if you are going to just completely go along with what everybody else wants and let everybody else's needs be more important than yours. But that has different negative consequences. So I think, we have to really look at what our options are again, because I think sometimes people think, keeping the peace with the family is much preferable. But then I kind of think, well, is it really? Because you not asking for what you want or what you need, again, there's often that resentment, there's anxiety, there's maybe sleepless nights, maybe you get sick, physically sick, either, you're more susceptible to colds and flus, or, you have the backache or the headache, your stomach's in knots. There's a lot of, ways that it shows up for us when we're tense and unhappy. So there's sort of no way of just suppressing all of your needs that's going to be a win for you.
Right. There will be consequences.
Right. And like I was saying, I think sometimes we're so afraid of the reaction that other people are going to have when we're assertive that we make that into such a catastrophe in our minds, and that may or may not be the reality. Again, I think, everybody does know their own family, but even still, I think as humans, we do have a tendency to anticipate the worst in a lot of situations. And I would just encourage people to consider the possibility that the reaction may not be as bad as you think it is, and that there are ways of delivering your assertive message that are kind. It doesn't need to be a shouting match and being demeaning to other people for you to kindly but directly say, hey, this is what I need this holiday, or this is what's going to work for me. I need to make a change, or I'm, choosing not to do that. Yeah, there may be disappointment, but often we can recover from that.
Running a group private practice has been a challenging and rewarding experience, and one thing that has made it so much easier is Therapy Notes. Therapy Notes makes billing, scheduling, note-taking, and telehealth incredibly easy. If you're coming from another EHR, like I did, Therapy Notes makes the transition incredibly easy, importing your demographic data free of charge so you can get going right away. My team has found Therapy Notes very easy to learn. It's intuitive. The customer support is second to none. And that's one of the things that has kept me a Therapy Notes customer for several years now. Anytime I've needed to contact Therapy Notes for help with an issue I couldn't figure out on my own, I've been able to get through to someone and resolve the issue within 15 minutes, 99% of the time. Find out what more than 100,000 mental health professionals already know. Try Therapy Notes for 2 months, absolutely free. Just click on the link in the show notes or enter the promo code CHAT at therapynotes.com. Thank you to Leading Edge Seminars for sponsoring this week's episode. If you're ready to get away this winter, register now for Innovations in Psychotherapy Cancun 2023 and use promo code Laura for 10% off any 5-day workshop fee when you purchase with a room at leadingedgecancun.com. At this unique learning and vacation experience, you'll gain new skills and tools and earn CEs in the morning, then have afternoons at leisure in an all-inclusive luxury resort. Imagine this: morning coffee on your private balcony, breakfast overlooking the ocean, training until lunch with one of today's leading clinicians like Frank Anderson, Ariel Schwartz, John Briere, and more, then fun all afternoon in a tropical paradise. Sounds good, right? Learn more at leadingedgecancun.com and register today for 10% off your workshop fee when you purchase with a room using promo code Laura. I'll see you there.
Yeah, and then it's easier to do it next time. You have to practice.
Yes, absolutely.
So, talking about creating new traditions, I wanted to bring up the issue for people who, I hear from a lot of people who talk about having quote unquote narcissistic family members and going quote unquote no contact. That's a big thing that, is in our popular culture right now. And a lot of people talk about that in therapy. Should I go no contact? I'm thinking of going no contact. And I am a big proponent of setting the boundaries that feel safe, especially if you have a family where there's been abuse. But for people who are in that situation where maybe they've decided to, they may not have completely cut off contact with their family, but maybe they're not going to be with them in person over the holidays. What would you recommend for people who are doing that and still they don't want to pretend it's not the holiday on the day. They still want to celebrate it, but they don't have anyone to be with, kind of by choice.
Yeah, it's a great question because I think that can feel really lonely for people. Again, there's that huge expectation that you should be with family on Christmas or on any holiday. And for, a variety of reasons, sometimes that's not possible or not something that we want to do. We recognize that that's not going to be emotionally healthy for us. So I would encourage people to start by thinking about what would feel good for them. Again, perhaps this is a situation where there is going to be, some time during that day where there's going to be sadness, and that's okay, and that you can make some space for that. But you could also sort of think creatively about other things that you could do on the holiday that would feel fun or, enjoyable, creative, exciting for you. And I think that's fairly personal about what would, be an enjoyable way to spend like Christmas Day by yourself. I know that there are some people who enjoy going to the movies. For other people, that might feel even more lonely, right? So that's sort of, know yourself, I think, in some of this. Or again, if you want to go out and go for a hike and spend some time outside, that could be something that some people enjoy. I think often the other thing that people like to do is to really feel like, like they can kind of create their own family, like with their friends, and for some people that might be an option. And I guess I would also just encourage people, if you're alone, but you don't want to be, like if you would really like to be around some friends, don't be afraid to say that to them. I know, maybe it's not, Miss Manners would disapprove of kind of trying to invite yourself to somebody else's Christmas, but I think for some people that can be okay. That, again, we need to assume that if it's not going to work for your friends, that they will let you know that. But I think oftentimes people sort of suffer in loneliness and in silence around these issues because they haven't let other people know what they need. And it's quite likely that there is a friend that you have that would be more than happy to welcome you to join their Christmas celebration, or come for Christmas dinner or a part of the day. Or maybe there's, some other people in your church or, something, another group that you're part of that would enjoy getting together and doing something. The other thing is like you sort of think again that you're the only one who's alone on Christmas, but you're not. There are many other people. The thing is, I think again, there's so much shame and there's sort of that taboo. Like I don't want to like say anything. It like just feels like such a loser thing to say. I have no one to spend Christmas with. But if you put it out there, I think there are going to be opportunities to connect with other people. Another idea that comes to my mind is maybe there's a volunteer opportunity as well. And that can feel really great, again, to just be giving to other people. And it's often a time when you can be with other people too, in this sort of community of community service. And giving back as well. So that's kind of what comes to my mind. I don't know if you had anything else that you were thinking, Laura.
Yeah, I had a couple things that I came up with too, and I loved what you said. The thing about volunteering definitely is something that I've suggested. It's not like, oh, make yourself appreciate what you have by going and being with someone, and helping someone who has less, but that's sort of like what happens when you do give and be of service. It just helps you feel gratitude for your own life and being in a position to be able to help, whether it's serving a meal at a homeless shelter, which is a 24/7 operation, whether it's Thanksgiving Day, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, whatever, someone has to be there and those meals need to be delivered. Or being with animals in an animal shelter, another 24-hour type operation. They still need to be petted. They still need their cages to be cleaned. And, the staff appreciates being able to take a day and not work on the holidays. So, someone usually has to be there. But I think that type of thing can be really helpful. And like you said, being in nature as well, here on the East Coast, you're always not too far from a beach or a river or a stream. I love being near water. It's something that's very soothing to me. And I grew up in Virginia and now living in Maryland. There's just as much of a chance that it'll be 50 or 60 degrees on Christmas Day as that it could be 30 degrees. So being at the beach in any weather, unless it's raining, is pretty much, it's always a grounding, enjoyable experience for me. And then there's, so many other ways to be in nature, just going for a walk in your neighborhood, no matter what kind of environment you live in. And then, but some other things that I thought of are, some people enjoy doing like yoga retreats or mindfulness retreats over holidays where the focus is not on the holiday, but it's still kind of like an inward practice and an opportunity to sort of be with others, but be with yourself. So it's kind of that same idea as you said about volunteering. You may be with other people, but you're not necessarily trying to make, a deep connection with them, because you may be having a lot of feelings on your own and you're kind of in your head, but you're still able to not feel as alone. And I've also recommended to people, if they have the way to do this, and this is a very privileged thing to be able to do, but going to a hotel or something where you can just kind of be taken care of and not have to do anything for anyone else, and the food's prepared for you, or even like something that you can do that's soothing, pampering, where you can get a massage or be taken care of in some way, especially if you're feeling alone and kind of, unloved, unwanted in relation to your family of origin. And, you don't have to actually spend a whole lot of money and get a massage. You can put Epsom salts in the bathtub and take a nice hot bath, or, use some aromatherapy oils to give yourself a foot massage. There are a lot of things that you can do that feel very nurturing and soothing that don't cost a lot of money. So, but I like that idea of doing things that are kind of the opposite of the feeling of loneliness and kind of unworthiness that you were talking about earlier, things that just bring a feeling of being taken care of, soothed, supported.
Yeah, I like that. Really resonates with me too, that idea of doing something very comforting and nurturing for yourself, especially if it's something that you wouldn't ordinarily do, maybe just because it does cost a little bit more money, or it just takes time that you wouldn't normally have during a busy work week. Like you said, I mean, it can just be, that nice, hot, soothing bath. It could be, curling up in front of the fireplace with a novel that you've been, anxious to read. And now you finally have a whole day to dive in. And, like that can just feel like, ooh, this is a treat for me. Or again, maybe it's, cooking, preparing some kind of food that you really enjoy, that you feel like, oh, this is a treat. And again, that's sort of, I feel like the message is, I deserve a treat. I deserve to be well taken care of, and I can do that for myself.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people who love baking and like to bake huge amounts of cookies or holiday things. And, if they're feeling alone at the holidays, or if they're literally going to be alone, they may feel like, well, if I do all that, like there will be too much for me to be able to eat and it's a waste. And should I even do it? And I've recommended there are homeless shelters for families that will gratefully accept your baked good donations. And just think how enjoyable that is for someone who's living in a homeless shelter. So they're away from their, holiday traditions to have some baked goods that were made by someone else with love. I think that's a really nice way to do what you enjoy, the baking, and have as much as you want for yourself. But if you love making huge amounts that you couldn't possibly eat before they would go to waste, then you can donate them.
Yes, I will second that. As somebody who worked for many years in a homeless shelter, sometimes we had enough volunteers, already signed up to come in and, make Christmas dinner or serve Christmas dinner. But just like you said, there are things that you can do at home and then deliver them to the shelter. And yes, they're often gratefully accepted, those types of donations of food and things that you made yourself. And I think you could also, maybe bring some of those treats around to your neighbors as well. And that can feel nice as well, just to say, I was thinking of you, and I'd like to share this plate of cookies with you. What a great neighborly thing to do.
It is. I'll tell you what, I mean, I might not be the most neighborly person, but there was one time when one of our neighbors brought us like a food from their country. It was a neighbor who had moved here from another country, and they were giving it to us for something. And I was like, this is unbelievably kind. Like I was so struck by that. It's just such a generous thing to do. But
right. That somebody took the time and the effort to make that for you and then bring it over. It's very sweet.
Yeah. It's connection. And I think that's the thing that we're missing. If we're alone at the holidays, or if we're, feeling sad about the way things were or how we feel during the holidays. It's wanting connection.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it, because I think the variety of different ideas that we talk about, you could almost put them into two categories. One is, how might I connect with other people? And the other one is, how might I connect with myself, right? And maybe it's a combination for you.
Yeah, and I think that is what is the recipe for surviving the holidays when you have a not so happy family of origin, or as I promised when I was telling our listeners about this upcoming episode, I said, surviving the holidays when you have a dysfunctional or abusive family of origin. It's focus on ways to connect with yourself and connect with others, whatever you need.
Yes, that whatever you need cannot be wrong.
Yes.
Right. It's so simple and yet so complicated, because that's not the message that we got as kids. It's not the message that we've told ourselves for all of these years, right? So often the message has been, you shouldn't have any needs, or if you do, your needs are wrong, and you should stuff them down and pretend like you don't have any. So it's really that empowering shift to start to tell yourself that you are entitled to have needs. Everybody has needs, and you are entitled to have those needs met. And part of that is figuring out how to meet some of those needs for yourself. And then the other part is, how can I communicate them to others? Because there's a relational component to having some of our needs met as well.
Yes, beautifully said. And Sharon, I know we have to finish up here, but you have an ebook that you created about getting through the holidays. Where can people find that if they want to refer to that for some additional resources?
Sure. That is on my website, which is livewellwithsharonmartin.com. And on there, you'll find on the menu, I have a couple of different ebooks, but this one is called Handling the Holidays. And like you said, I put this together this year really with the idea of trying to provide some extra support for folks who are feeling particularly anxious and stressed out going into the holidays. And again, particularly for folks who struggle with family relationships and knowing that those are, at least somewhat, complex and dysfunctional, and wanting to be able to make some different choices for themselves. I really emphasize, with my clients and in my books and so forth, the idea that, you can't change other people. You can't, make your family be different this year, but there's a lot that you can do to help yourself either cope or make choices or, be more assertive in order to create holidays that are going to be more fulfilling and happier for you.
I love that. So I will be sure to put a link to the ebook or your website where they can find the ebook and all the wonderful things that you write. And I'll put that in the details for this episode so people can get right to it from their phones or whatever device they're listening on. Sharon, thank you so much for coming back to Therapy Chat today. And I want to have you back again another time soon, because I know you have more goodies that you've been working on that I'm dying to talk about with you for our audience. So until next time.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. And I wish all of you listening, a holiday that feels right for you, that feels like you've been able to empower and take care of yourself through these challenges.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you to Therapy Notes for sponsoring this week's episode. I do love Therapy Notes. It's such an asset to my business and makes my job as a practice owner and a therapist much easier. Try it today with no strings attached and see why everyone is switching to Therapy Notes, now featuring ePrescribe. Use coupon code CHAT or click the link in the show notes to get 2 free months at therapynotes.com. Thank you to Leading Edge Seminars for sponsoring this week's episode. If you're ready to get away this winter, register now for Innovations in Psychotherapy Cancun 2023 and use promo code Laura for 10% off any 5-day workshop fee when you purchase with a room at leadingedgecancun.com. You'll earn CEs in the morning, then have afternoons for fun at an all-inclusive resort. Workshops by Frank Anderson, Ariel Schwartz,
John Briere, and more. Register today for 10% off workshop fees when purchased with a room using code LAURA at leadingedgecancun.com.
Thank you for listening to Therapy Chat with your host, Laura Reagan, LCSWC. For more information, please visit therapychatpodcast.com.